Alrighty. In this video, we'll be doing section 6.2, talking about inconsistent systems and dependent equations. Basically what happens if we get one of those no solutions, infinitely many, and so on and so on. Objectives. One and two are basically asking you to identify inconsistent systems and solve systems with dependent equations. In our first example, we have 4x minus 3y equals 6 and y equals 4/3 x minus 2. I'm going to put this in standard form. So this will just be 4x minus 3y equals 6. I'm going to subtract the 4/3 over. So that gives me negative 4/3 x plus y equals negative 2. You're more than welcome to get rid of the fraction, the negative if you want, but it doesn't really matter. For sake of no fractions, I'm going to start off by I'll just do that. I'm just going to multiply by 3, make your life a little bit easier. But it doesn't matter. You don't have to do this part. When I do that, I do get negative 4x plus 3y equals negative 6. I'm now going to turn this into, because I want us to use the Gaussian elimination or Gauss-Jordan elimination. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into an augmented matrix. That gives me 4, negative 4, negative 3, 3, 6, and negative 6. If you recall, our first stage is to make this guy a 0. So I'm literally just going to add row 1 to row 2, and that will be my new row 2. By doing that, the first row will remain the same. 4 minus 4 is 0. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. 6 plus negative 6 is 0. So we get a weird situation where everything zeroes out on the bottom. When everything zeroes out, you're basically stating 0 equals 0. Ask yourself if that is a true statement. If it is, you can basically, for my sake, on the final, you can just say infinitely many solutions. But for your homework's sake, it's going to want you to either solve for x and y up on top. And it doesn't matter which way you go. So let's say this is 4x minus 3y equals 6. I'm just going to solve for y. It doesn't matter if you solve for x or y. If I solve for y, I get y equals 6 minus 4x divided by negative 3. If I simplify that up, that'll give me 4/3 x minus 2. And basically what you're stating is your answer will be whatever you want x to be, but then your y would then be 4/3 x minus 2. And the way they want you to officially write this is put this in a bracket where this is your answer. That's a 4, by the way. Just getting worse. such that x is any real number. Basically, you're stating x can be whatever it wants, but whatever you choose for x, then y will have a certain value. And if you would have solved for x, then it'd have been vice versa. You would have an equation for x, comma, y, and then y can be any real number. So technically, this has two different answers that you could write out. And that's pretty much what you're doing in that one. And if you happen to have a three variable equation, you'll get something that looks like this. You get x minus 3y, example 2, not example 3, minus 3y plus 17z equals 1, x minus y plus 7z equals 2, 2x minus 5y plus 29z equals 5. All right, so in this situation, I'm going to turn this into an augmented matrix. So I get 1, 1, 2, -3, -1, -5, 17, 7, 29, and then 1, 2, 5. All right, again, the first objective is to make this a 0. So I'm going to do 2 times row 2 minus row 3. That will be my new row 3. Again, I'm just trying to multiply this row by you could have done this one as well. It doesn't really matter. But the goal is to make this a 0. So I think I made an equation that makes this 0. So that means that row 1 and row 2 will remain the same. And then 2 times row 2 is 2 minus row 3, which is 2. So 2 minus 2 is 0. That's what I wanted. So I accomplished that. 2, this becomes -2 plus 5 will give you 3. This will become 14 minus 29. That should be -15. This will be 4 minus 5, which is -1. All right. This is needs to now become a 0 as well. So that's what I'm going to do. So this guy's supposed to be 0. I think, again, the best thing to do is just take row 1 minus row 2 and let that be my new row 2. So that's just 1, -3, 17, 1. 1 minus 1 is 0, which is what I wanted. -3 plus 1 would be -2. 17 minus 7 is 10. 1 minus 2 is -1. And then row 3 will remain the same as well. All right, your next goal is now to make this a 0. You might be tempted just to add these 2, but then that right there would make this no longer a 1. So I would actually almost say the best thing to do is to probably go ahead and make this guy become a 1. But you know what? It really doesn't matter. You're just trying to make this a 0. I tell you what, we won't do that way. We'll just go ahead and move on to that next step and making that a 0. The more you do this, the more patterns you'll find, and you'll figure out what works best for you. But see, what I'll do is I'll take 3 times row 2, and that'll give me a -6. So if I make it a plus 2 times row 3, so 3 times -2 is -6, then that would be +6, and that would 0 out. And that'll be my new row 3. Again, it doesn't matter what kind of formula you come up with. There's probably 1,000 different ways you could do this, but the goal is to make this a 0. However, you can make that a 0 without changing this 0 to anything else other than 0. That's the process you want to go with. All right, so the answer here would be then 1, -3, 17, 1. Then 0, -2, 10, -1. All right, so here we go. So that would be 3 times 0 plus 2 times 0 is 0. So that did not change, which is what we wanted. 3 times -2 is -6. 2 times 3 is +6. Add those together gives you 0, which is what we did want. Make that a good 0 there. All right, and then we get 30 minus 30, which is 0. Then we get -3 minus 2 is -5. All right, so then we get in a situation where we now have an equation where it says 0 equals -5. And yet that's just if that is a true solution, and that is not. So on the test, I would just ask you to just say no solution. On your homework, it's going to ask you to write an empty set, meaning there's no answer there. Alrighty. All right, so let's look at some different cases just so you're prepared for your homework. If I have, let's do number 3. So let's say this is x plus 3y plus 9z equals 12. And then let's say this is 2x plus 7y plus 22z equals 26. And let's say this is -5x minus 17y minus 53z equals -64. All right, so once again, our goal is to turn this into an augmented matrix. So by doing so, this just becomes 1, 2, -5, 3, 7, -17, 9, 22, -53, and then 12, 26, -64. All right, as usual, the process goes as this needs to become a 0. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to take 5 times row 2, which will give me 10. And if I just say plus 2 times row 3, that'll give me -10. So there will be my cancellation, and that'll be my new row 3. So here we go. So that's going to be 1, 3, 9, 12, 2, 7, 22, 26. All right, so 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times -5 is -10. Those two together gives you 0. All right, then 5 times 2 is 35. Minus 34 is 1. Woo, good. Like when it comes out nice. That is 110 minus 106, which is 4. That's going to be, oh, what's it, 130 minus 128. So 130 minus 128 is what? 130 minus 128 is 2. There you go. If you recall, the next step is to then make this guy a 0. I'm going to make this guy a 0. Best way I see is if I just do 2 times row 1 minus row 2. Give me 2 minus 2, which is 0. That'll be my new row 2. So my answer here becomes 1, 3, 9, 12. And then here we have 2 times 1, which is 2, minus 2, which is 0. And then we have 6 minus 7, which is -1. And we have 18 minus 22, which is -4. Then we have 24 minus 26, which is -2. And then we have 0, 1, 4, 2. And then if you recall, the next step is to make this guy become a 0. And it looks like if I just add these two up, so I'm going to take row 1 plus row, nope, row 2. take row 2 plus row 3, and that will be my new row 3. So that'd just be 1, 3, 9, 12, 0, -1, -4, -2. 0 plus 0 is 0. -1 plus 1 is 0, which is great. -4 plus 4 happens to also be 0. And then -2 plus 2 happens to be 0 again. So again, I get this equation 0 equals 0, which again just means infinitely many solutions, but your homework wants to be extra. So what we have here is you have another equation here, which is going to be negative x minus 4z equals -2. Since z can practically be anything at once, you're just going to solve for x here. So that would just be negative x equals 4z minus 2, and then x equals -4z plus 2. That's your first equation. And then you want to take this equation right here, which will then just be 1. You want to replace x with the z function, which would be -4z plus 2 plus your 3y plus 9z equal to 12. And your goal is then to solve for the y. Yes. Take the white-faced ones. All right, so basically I'm just going to move everything over, probably combine like terms here. So that just becomes -4z plus 2 plus 3y plus 9z equals 12. So that right there would then just give me 2 plus 3y plus 5z equals 12. And again, the goal is to solve for the y. So that right there will give me 3y equals -5z. Subtract the 2 from the 12, you get 10. Then divide the 3 here, so you get -5/3 z plus 10/3. And so now you have two equations with z, where z can be anything at once. So it wants you then to write the equation as -4z plus 2, -5/3 z plus 10/3, comma, z, because z gets to be whatever it wants, such that z is any real number. And really, in reality here, you could let x or y be that number where then you had to plug it all in. But it's a lot easier to go this way since you can see that z is the guy. But you could have gone right here. You could have solved for z here and let x been the guy. Oh, you know what? I think I did that completely backwards. This equation would have been a y. Oh, this is fun. Oh, this is fun. All right, so let me just. Gotta love when you mess up and there's no one here to tell you. All right. Hopefully you saw the mistake and you're yelling at your screen to go, hey, you made a mistake. And you're like, I'm not writing that down because I know it's a mistake. But that's not supposed to be an X right there. That is your X, Y, Z. This right here is supposed to be, your Y value. You go through the same process, but now your Y, just to go quicker through this, that becomes a plus 4z, then you're going to divide by -1. So that becomes -4z. When you divide by -1, that becomes plus 2. All right. And then you go back and you plug it in, and it's actually just x plus 3 times -4z plus 2 plus 9z equals 12. So this really just becomes 12, -12z plus 6 plus 9z equals 12. Then you get negative 3z plus 6 equals 12. Then your x equation is actually going to be 6 plus 3z, probably a lot easier. So the actual answer here, when done correctly, will be 6 plus 3z, comma, negative 4z plus 2, comma, z, such that z is any real number. And there you go. And then that's how you would want to do that. All righty. I think that will take care of all of that. And it does get into some word problems, but I'll go ahead and I'll just delete those from the homework. You won't see that kind of stuff on the test. All righty. Hope this helps.